All right. Well, we're in this historic, dignified place in the shadow of William Penn. So let's start today with this quote from him. Okay. All right. Well, we'll figure it. Oh, yeah. No, that was it. There we go.
Okay.
All right. All right. Good. All right. Today, since we're going to be talking a fair bit about honesty, I want to model that. So the next slide is probably even closer to my take on some of what we're going to cover today. All right. So what is Freemasonry? We have a standard answer, right? It's a fraternity that makes good men better. And sometimes we give a longer answer that it's a system of moral instruction, veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. For the brothers who are members of the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction, there are 6 core values. Those are devotion to country, integrity, justice, reverence for God, service to humanity, and toleration. One member of Thompson Lodge in Paoli, above the station of the worshipful master in the east, are the words faith, hope, and charity. These are the 3 theological virtues found in the Bible. Freemasons also talk about being honest and forthright and practicing moderation. We're not a service fraternity, but we're rightly proud of our charitable efforts. And that's just what happens when you get a bunch of good guys together. But you see, as soon as we start to talk about Freemasonry, we talk about being a good man, we talk about values and virtues and ethics. There may be distinctions between those terms. Today, I'm probably going to use them interchangeably. Today, we're going to talk about a value that we haven't mentioned yet. That's kind of odd because I'm going to suggest courage is the foundational value of Freemasonry. That it is not possible to be a good person or a good man or a good Mason or to practice any other value without courage. I don't expect you to take my word for it. I don't even want you to take my word for it. The need for a good person to have courage has been shared by a wide range of great minds across history. And today I plan to show you why. Plato called courage, quote, a very noble quality and, quote, sort of endurance of the soul. He called it one of the 4 cardinal virtues, along with justice, wisdom, and moderation. He distinguished thoughtful courage, which he regarded as rare, from bold and rash and fearless courage, which he regarded as common. Plato never defined courage, but he convinced Aristotle that courage was a virtue. Fast forward a bit, Immanuel Kant spent a fair bit of time studying Aristotle's thoughts on courage as a virtue. And from Kant, we get this great quote in Latin, sapere aude, dare to know, or have the courage to know. Loosely translated, it's have the courage to use your own understanding. That's something that's expected of a Freemason, that we consider what we hear and then make our own judgments about what is true and what's worth following. Fast forward all the way to the 20th century, we have the Serenity Prayer attributed to Reinhold Niebuhr. Okay, a lot of folks know this. In particular, I'm thinking of the line, courage to change the things I can. If Freemasons really are good men, we're getting better, that requires change. And change is scary and painful and hard. We're going to talk more about that in a bit. Let's go to one more author. Maya Angelou said, quote, courage is the most important of all the virtues. Because without courage, you can't practice any other value consistently. You can practice any value erratically, but nothing consistently without courage. So we have lots of different authors, different times, different cultures, all saying basically the same thing about courage. But before we go any further, we need a definition of courage. So thinking about it, what is it? Most of the time, we hear lots of references to fear. And for normal conversation, that works. People know what we mean. Most of the time, we know courage when we see it. We know courage when we don't see it. But the references to fear causes two problems. The first is that we all know stories about incredible courage from veterans and first responders, people who did things like charge into burning buildings, charge into enemy guns. When there's an interview later, what does the interviewer always ask? Weren't you scared? And what's always the answer? There wasn't time to be scared. I saw what was happening. I understood it. I remembered my training, and I knew what I had to do. Maybe there's fear later, but not at the time. So if we need fear to have courage, then we have a problem. Because these are events of incredible, undeniable courage without somebody saying, I was afraid and I still did it. Second problem is specific to Freemasonry. In our degrees, a candidate is placed in a circumstance or shown something, given some information, with the expectation that the degree will teach him something and lead to interchange. I'm not aware of a degree in which a candidate is asked if he is afraid. I don't think that Freemasonry would be successful if we were asking men about their feelings. Can you imagine that conversation? Yeah, I went to join the Masons. They put me in a dark room and started asking me about my feelings. Tell you what, I ran out as fast as I could, and I never went back. Fortunately, there are people who research courage. I have brothers who think that I'm an academic weenie, and that's okay. Here's where the research helps us out. Most modern definitions of courage say nothing at all, nothing about fear. Instead, courage is an intentional act. I'll say that again. Courage is an intentional act. And that fits perfectly for us as Masons because we describe our fraternity and what we do in terms of work. Now, there are lots of different types of courage, but we'll limit this presentation to 4 types that make the most sense in terms of Freemasonry and what most of us do in our daily lives. These types are physical, social, moral, and a really neat idea called workplace courage. Might be new to you. They're different, but they often overlap. They usually include an element of uncertainty about the outcome of the courageous act. One act can also be multiple types of courage. Today's presentation is open, which means that it's being shared with people who aren't Masons. So there are some things that I can't say about our degrees. Those things aren't secret, they're private. And I promised that I wouldn't share them outside of the fraternity, but I'll do my best to be clear. So let's start out with physical courage, and that'll be the next. One more. There we go. Okay. This is the kind of courage that we just talked about. It's clear and it's easy to understand. Physical courage is when a person knowingly places themselves in physical danger to prevent harm to someone else or for a worthwhile cause. Be it many service jobs, military and first responders, construction workers. Oh my gosh, the folks who work high steel, I could never do that. Road construction, sanitation, and healthcare. Every time that there's a school shooting, there's a silent mass expression of physical courage by the teachers and students when they return to school. But coming back to Freemasonry, we know that there are times when being a good man means putting yourself into physical danger. Anytime that you think about protecting someone, maybe walking someone to their car, something along those lines, that's what you're saying. I'm going to put myself between danger and somebody else. So thinking about our degrees, there's one that's a favorite here in Pennsylvania, an event that actually happened during the Battle of Gettysburg. Confederate General Lewis Armistead and Union General Winfield Scott Hancock were Masons, and they were friends before the Civil War. And when Armistead fell during Pickett's charge, he was helped by Union Captain Henry Bingham, who was also a Mason. Bingham tended to Armistead and honored his Masonic promises and carried Armistead's personal effects to Hancock. There's also a degree that's set against the backdrop of the Oregon Trail. One of the characters has cholera. Cholera is a deadly and infectious disease, and the Oregon Trail was a dangerous place. It's the nation's longest graveyard. Over a 25-year span, up to 65,000 deaths occurred along the Western trails. If they were evenly spaced along the length of the Oregon Trail, it would be a grave every 50 yards from Missouri to Oregon City. In the Scottish Rite, the Civil War degree exemplifies integrity and devotion to country. And the Oregon Trail degree exemplifies integrity and reverence for God. In our discussion today, both of these degrees exemplify physical courage and a few other types of courage that we'll discuss in a bit. But let's take a moment to talk about integrity. It is dangerous. Dangerous for two reasons. First is that when you make a promise, you might find yourself later obligated to do something that you didn't expect when you made the promise. Maybe something that you didn't want to do, maybe something that was more difficult than what you had in mind. Sometimes being a Freemason means hearing malicious lies about your fraternity. Many of these lies are about how Freemasonry is a secret society, about the promises that we make to each other. Many brothers have a standard reply: Freemasonry isn't a secret society, it's a society with secrets. I have a bit of a different take on it, and it connects to the second danger of integrity. Freemasonry really doesn't have many secrets left. Most of them have been published in books and online. It's not hard to find what you want to know without joining the fraternity, but we still expect our members to keep some information private. Those promises are about integrity. Are you really what you claim to be? Will you really do what you promise to do? Is your word any good? If the answers are yes, then you're honest and you stand by your principles, which is to say, you have integrity. And that's dangerous because it makes you predictable. For anyone without integrity, your honesty makes you look weak, makes you look like a sucker. Integrity is dangerous, and acting with integrity is courage. Before we move on from physical courage, let's think about some other degrees. And again, I have to be careful about how I say this. There are times when a candidate is placed in unfamiliar circumstances among unfamiliar people, often when he's not in a condition to protect himself or to escape quickly. Freemasons don't haze and we don't hurt candidates, but this is a new experience. He may not believe that. Does not know exactly what will happen to you. It would be understandable for courage to think that he's in danger. I suggest that it takes physical courage even to become a Mason. Physical courage is usually easy to spot, and it's easy to see how it's necessary for the practice of other virtues. It's also easy to see how physical courage could be necessary for the practice of other types of courage, like moral and social courage, which we'll talk about next. All right. Yes. Great quote from Brother Churchill. And by the way, as I worked on getting this presentation together, it's amazing, some of the stuff that just sort of came floating my way. Great quote from Brother Churchill. Again, somebody who had undeniable courage. So let's talk about moral courage and social courage, and we'll talk about them in combination. An intentional act can definitely be one or the other. These two seem to combine often. And I think this is where most of us spend most of our time. Moral courage can take the form of doing what's good for others, regardless of risk to self, or it can mean standing up for a value, even against pressure, even if there's a risk of exclusion from your group. And this is where moral courage overlaps with social courage, which is action for a worthy objective that happens in the context of social intimidation, despite the need for some connection to the group. Okay, that's a mouthful. We are living in a very polarized, I'd say extremely polarized era. We're all on one side or the other, and we're not being given the same information. There's an algorithm out there that makes money for somebody by telling us what we want to hear. We assume that everyone hears the same things that we hear, just to be sure they even give us a little nudge. But on the other side, whatever it is, because they're supposedly hearing the same information, they got to be stupid and crazy and evil because they don't have the same opinion about what we mistakenly assume to be the same information. We're broken into tribes, and we think that the other side is dangerous. So safety is with our own tribe. So humans are social animals, but it goes beyond being liked, which is important enough. Down to a certain level of weakness, pack will rally around a member, try to protect them, strengthen them. But as soon as the weakness gets to be too great, the member is a threat to the pack, and the switch flips, and the pack turns on the member, who becomes the enemy. Now, you might think this happens in street gangs. I don't know, maybe it does. But I know that happens in many other places, including monastic communities. To be safe, we need to belong. That gets us to the next slide. So let's take this combination of moral and social courage one step further. We can say that we admire the person who stands up for his values. Sure, at the extreme, this readily combines with physical courage to become the stuff of heroes and martyrs. But what happens when you stand up and you say that you need to do what you think is right, and that right is different from what the rest of your pack is doing? How does that sound to your pack? You're telling them that what they're doing is wrong, and you're right. But we all need to believe that we are right. So we'll admire the man who stands up for what he thinks is right until something different from what we're doing. I suggest to you that Freemasonry is our pack. Among our expectations is that we will be benevolent and moral toward everyone, no exceptions, including and especially people who don't agree with us, because it's easy to be benevolent and moral to your friends. Step out of the group and reach across the barbed wire and see the other as a person, the same as yourself, deserving of the same respect and kindness as yourself, is a dangerous act. It is an act of moral courage. It is an act of social courage. It is the act of a Freemason. Freemasonry is our pack. It has existed since time immemorial, long before a political party or social movement or a social media platform. Freemasonry is going to outlast all of those too. So thinking about that Gettysburg event degree, there was physical courage in stopping during a battle to help an enemy, or at least a person dressed as an enemy. There was also moral courage. Captain Bingham followed a set of distinctly Masonic expectations while interacting with General Armistead. Captain Bingham's actions were also social courage. He risked the respect of other Union soldiers, people whose opinion of him kept him alive. He needed their respect in combat simply by being kind to a man who they regarded as their enemy. But let's go a step further and think about the social courage that it takes to even become a Mason. What are the malicious lies that are told about us? We hear that we worship Lucifer, and we hear that we worship Baphomet, and we hear that we're Illuminati who control the world. There are churches that don't want their members to even become Freemasons, who will expel us for joining. We can lose friends and family members who believe these lies. So every time that somebody notices your ring, it says, "Oh, you're a Mason," there's a chance in the next part you'll hear something nice about how they know Masons are good men, and they got a friend or a family member who's a Mason. And there's a chance he's going to be falsely accused of something ridiculous and awful. And we take that on when we join Freemasonry. I think that social courage and moral courage are the stuff of everyday life. They make possible the routine practice of being a person. Let's look at the Scottish Rite of Toleration, the Scottish Rite value of toleration, which means respect for the opinions of others. You don't have to agree, but you should respect those opinions in the same way that you want your opinions respected. And you can't do that without listening to someone who is different from you, maybe hearing something that you not only don't agree with, something that you really don't like, something that upsets you. That's a risk. There's also a risk in standing up to defend someone else. And here again is the combination of moral and social courage. We're men, and that means that we have a lot of power. The moral use of that power to defend people who don't have power, people who are being bullied and beaten down. That's the Scottish Rite value of justice. That's moral, and that's the act of a Freemason, and it takes courage. Let's talk about workplace courage, and that'll be our next slide. Yeah. We have one more type of courage to talk about, one that may be new to you. It was new to me when I started to look at this topic. We're going to talk about workplace courage. It seems to be perfectly suited to Freemasonry. And then we'll wrap up by talking about what we can do with all this new information. Workplace courage is defined overall as work domain relevant acts done for a worthy cause, despite significant risks perceivable in the moment to the actor. Yeah, there's the academic weenie stuff, but this is going to be good, I promise. There are a whole bunch of types of workplace courage, but for our purposes today, four types stand out. One is positive or constructive deviance, which is intentional behavior that departs from the norms of a referent group in honorable ways. Another is pro-social rule breaking, which is the intentional violation of formal policy, regulation, or prohibition, with the intention of promoting the welfare of the organization or its stakeholders. This is going to get better, I promise. It's technical stuff right now. Improvement-oriented voice, verbal behavior that constructively challenges the status quo, the intent to improve rather than merely criticize, and proactive behavior, which is anticipatory action taking impact on itself or their environment. Okay, that's a mouthful of psychology, and it's jargon, and it's probably new information. So let's break this down. There's two groups here. First group is about challenging the norms. Second group is about making improvements. In the first group, positive or constructive deviance is when you follow your own values, even though it means separating from your group. Pro-social rule breaking takes that one step further. It happens when you knowingly break the rules of an organization to benefit the organization, someone who's important to it. You see this one in the movies all the time. Most recently, it's Maverick and Top Gun. It's a fun idea. You're going to break the rules and get away with it and even make stuff better. But that mostly happens in the movies. Organizations take care of themselves. And though others may admire your courage and what you did, they're going to leave you to your own devices. Again, there's the overlap with moral courage and social courage. Coming back to the Scottish Rite degrees, there's another one set against the historical event, sinking of the SS Dorchester, a troop ship that was torpedoed and sunk during World War II, February 1943. There were 4 Army chaplains aboard from various religions and denominations. While the ship was sinking, these men remained aboard and prayed. And they gave their life jackets and warm clothing to other men. It's a true story, and you can look it up. In the Scottish Rite, this degree exemplifies reverence for God, toleration, service to others, and devotion to country. For our purposes today, this event also exemplifies physical courage, moral courage, pro-social rule breaking, and proactive behavior, working to improve your environment. Proactive behavior and the improvement-oriented voice are about trying to make a situation better. Not the keyboard commando who slams everything from afar. It's the man in the arena, guy with sweat on his face and skin in the game, working to pull the organization and his colleagues up. Freemasons are expected to correct their brothers gently. This is a value that shocks people who think that we support each other unconditionally no matter what we do. Freemasons don't work like that. This type of workplace courage happens when you work to improve yourself and your environment. And this is about the hard and scary journey, becoming better. So we'll get the next slide, please. Another good quote from another brother. Got a couple today from Theodore Roosevelt. Becoming better is tough and dangerous work. It means seeing that how you did things wasn't the best way of doing it. So now you need to do better. That takes honesty and it takes responsibility. Honesty, we all think we want it, but we don't. Does this dress make me look fat? Do I look that stupid to you? If I vote for you, what will you do for me? That's honesty with other people. If you really want honesty, work with kids like I do. This summer, I'm trying to lose some weight because the kids I work with have told me that they think I'm expecting twins. And I bring this up because I'm using a calorie tracker. And there are times when I'm really tempted to lie to the calorie tracker. So that makes any sense. So that would do me any good. When you're trying to be honest with yourself, you can't even lie and pretend to believe the lie that you just told to yourself. And that's why it goes hand in hand with responsibility. Seeing the wrong that you do and the good that you fail to do, and knowing in that painful moment that you have to do better. It's a lot easier to just believe that you're right. Fortunately, if you reach that painful moment, seeing that you're doing something wrong, the next moment is the relief of knowing that you have the power to change your situation. Masons are expected to improve ourselves and to gently correct each other, even though it's a lot safer to just ignore it. So as we start to wrap up, the next slide, please. Another one from Brother Roosevelt. Let's take another look at those values that we mentioned at the start. Faith, hope, and charity, 3 theological virtues. Faith is the belief that a God you can't understand and can't prove exists and provide for and protect you. That takes courage. Hope is the same thing, except when we're talking about the future, that it will be good, and that takes courage. So what about charity? Maybe you don't see a risk. Okay, so you bought some new socks and gave them to Joy of Socks in Phoenixville so that they could distribute them to homeless adults and children. Or you spent the day entertaining sick children at a Shriners Hospital. Maybe you drove out to a Masonic village to serve our retired brothers and their wives. Think no big deal. What you did though was took your money and you took your time and your energy that you could use to make money, build your own resources for your own survival, and you gave it away. You can't get it back. You'll probably be okay. Everything will probably be fine when you get home. But you can't be sure. You took a risk for something that you thought was worthwhile, and that act, charity, is courage. Talked about the Scottish Rite values of integrity and justice and toleration. We mostly covered the values of service to others and reverence for God and devotion to country. There's always more that we can say, but there are limits to time and attention. And we need to talk about what we're going to do with all this new information. Got our next slide, please. Freemasonry is all about useful knowledge. And now that we have some new information, what are we going to do with it? I have, of course, 3 suggestions. First is that we realize that we have taken sides in the battle between good and evil. Square on the compass is a symbol of that decision. It's as real as a badge or a uniform. We're not neutral. We have declared ourselves to be good men. We're becoming better. And that comes with risks, and sometimes it even comes with enemies. Second suggestion is that we need to realize and teach that the work of Freemasonry is hard. I know a martial arts instructor who teaches kids that discomfort leads to movement and growth. Those are kids. Kids, we're grown men. We know this already. We know that being a good man in a world that is often not good is hard. Rocky Balboa said, it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. We talked about academic leanings, knowing the right answers without having to live the challenges. So we'll keep with the boxing metaphor for another moment. What do they say? Everyone has a plan until they get hit. It's easy when you don't have to do it. It's easy when you don't understand it. Freemasonry is all about knowing and doing. At the same time, though, we can see how gentle we need to be with ourselves and with others. What looks like a moral failure may actually just be a failure of nerves. Knowing what is right takes understanding. Doing what is right takes courage, and that's a different set of skills. My third suggestion is that we teach courage. Fortunately, that's possible. Sure, some people are naturally brave, but again, courage is an act. And so it is possible to learn how to do courage. Even better, Freemasonry is all about teaching and learning. I don't know all the degrees in Freemasonry, another Blue Lodge, and the Scottish Rite and the Royal Arch degrees, and a few others. And all of them require and exemplify at least one type of courage, usually a few types. We have stories that are set in the Old Testament, the American Revolution, and lots of stories about knights and missions. I think that we're showing courage all the time. Now that we know that we don't have to admit to being scared, to talk about courage, we don't have to talk about our feelings at all. It's safe to talk about courage. So we can point out courage among the other values in our degrees. Go on to the next slide, please. This is just kind of a neat word, and it fits with the idea of uncertainty, acts of courage. A while ago, I said that many moral failures are actually failures of nerve, failures of courage. That can happen when we haven't experienced or considered a situation before, when it's new or it's uncertain. If you look at the training of emergency responders, much of it is about the what-if incidents. The wrong time to learn a new skill is in the middle of an emergency. So encouraging our candidates to imagine themselves in the situations and think about how they might handle it, how they want to handle it, is a good way to prepare. They can do this with others, or they can do it privately on their own time. That is instruction based in storytelling or allegory, which is what we do. There's one more way. We learn courage by observing others, which is also part of how Freemasonry makes good men better, by learning from each other. Specifically, I'm talking about leadership. Just like with courage, there are people who are natural leaders. Those skills are better when they're taught, and they're better when they're refined. Freemasonry has schools for leaders. I was a worshipful master. That was tough. The only way that I can imagine what it's like for the district deputy grand masters is to think about the trouble that I caused to my district deputy grand master. For the brothers who are further up the line, yeah, that's a hard job. Those guys have my great respect. Courageous leadership, setting a good example, isn't swagger or arrogance. That's weakness. Instead, we're looking for the guy who's honest, who says, yeah, this is going to be hard, and we're going to get it done. The brothers at Palestine Roxborough Lodge number 135, I posted something recently on their Instagram page. That's going to be our last slide for today. I just thought it was really cool, and I want to give those guys the last word.